Alex, if you will, I'll hand it over to you.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Jake, for having me. Thanks, everybody, for being here or there or however is appropriate to. There we go. So yeah, Jake had asked me to help kick off this lunchtime series, and he sort of gave me the prompt of how this crisis is affecting small business and gig workers. And I'm going to sort of approach that through the lens of the solo small businesses, or maybe the duo or trio small businesses that I work closest with. But all these things really do apply to businesses, I think, of all sizes. I think just the context I'm sharing is from really the solo service businesses, and we'll be talking a little bit about product businesses as well. The importance of finding resources for this population, as well as how to stay nimble and what we can do concretely. As Jake mentioned before, I've got some experience working with this community, but I also, in a weird way, feel kind of grateful that Indie Hall and our freelance community has always been a heavily online community. So I'm sort of playing double duty of sort of redoubling our efforts in that direction. Now we used to split our effort. I don't know if it was 50-50, but we used to spend our effort split between online efforts and running a physical workspace. Now, whatever we were putting into running a physical workspace, other than mail management, stuff like that, we get to put everything online, as well as helping other people set up events like this. So if you are trying to figure this out, and if there's anything that we can do to help myself or my team or our members, feel free to reach out. I did leave my social handles and stuff like that in the chat, but also my email address is open all the time, alex@indiehall.org. Feel free to reach out. So a little bit of context, Indie Hall is turning 14 years this old, and doggone it, we're going to make it to our 14th birthday. I'm certain of that. At this point, about 70% of our members are independent contractors, freelancers, and what I call a solo or duo business. Mostly service businesses there as well. So again, a lot of exposure to this community. A couple months ago, we also launched a new event that we're turning into the event series. I see Catherine Sontag is here in the room. Hey, Catherine. Catherine and I worked together to launch an event called the Freelance Fest, which is going to be morphing into the Philly freelance community. That had around 200 people across 15 different service verticals: design, digital marketing, business services like legal, accounting, HR, photography, all over the board. You can, if that's new to you, you can check out phillyfreelance.com for that. The website currently is still from the event. So ignore all of the content and just put your email address in there. If there's something in there that's interesting to you. We've got some really interesting stuff coming up in the coming weeks in terms of workshops and office hours really geared towards the freelance ecosystem. And then the last bit of context is for almost as long as I've been running Indie Hall, my friend Amy Hoy and I have collaborated to run a business called Stacking the Bricks, which is a website, stackingthebricks.com, as well as a collection of educational, informational products designed to help people who have skills to run a service business make the shift into productizing those services, which makes them able to reach different audiences and make more money. I'm not one of those passive income gurus. That's totally not my game. But I think there's a lot of service people who would either do well to augment their income by learning how to market effectively their skills as products, as well as to potentially down the road replace their service income entirely if they so choose. That program, we've had over 2,000 students through the program, about 300 a year right now. We've ramped up a lot in the last 2 years. And again, that's stackingthebricks.com. Our flagship course is called 30 by 500. Lots of articles and podcasts and stuff you can check out there. So that's the background, why I know what I know and where my perspective is coming from. I want to talk about the problem, and the problem specifically for this population. And a lot of this is fear, and some of it is fact. And right now it's tough to tell which is which. So I'm going to try and focus on the facts while also acknowledging that people are afraid for a lot of very good reasons. In a lot of ways, it's not knowing what comes is sometimes worse than knowing exactly what's going to come. And we're living in this environment, every single one of us, regardless of whether you're employed or you run your own business, however big or small, is living in this time of uncertainty. And so I'm going to try and focus on the things that are concrete, that we do know, that are extraordinarily unlikely to change, no matter what happens over the next several months, and what we can do about it. So the problem, I think, for most freelancers is that from their perspective, and in many cases this is true, is that hourly work is the easiest to cut. Just from a logistical perspective, the difference between ending a contract or not renewing a contract and getting rid of an employee is just like a world of a difference. For that reason, a lot of people are extra afraid of their security in their contract positions. But I think that's a worthy fear. The other problem, I think, is that in that scenario, lots of freelancers and gig workers, I would venture to say the majority of them, don't really know how to market themselves proactively. And the reason I say that is because the number one answer I hear people say within our communities is that people say their number one source of marketing is word of mouth, which is great. That's a sign that what you're doing works. However, if that's all you've ever relied on, when we're in an environment where everyone is distracted, confused, worried about money, and you have no way of getting a message out to prospective clients, specifically prospective clients who already have a sense of who you are, what you can do for them, and whether or not you're trustworthy, you're working at a disadvantage. So an aptitude or experience in proactive marketing is definitely a deficiency for a lot of freelancers and solo small businesses. Another big problem is that freelancers and gig workers have basically no safety net. This is especially true in the United States. It's better in some places around the world, but the US is I'm not telling you anything you don't know there. Health insurance is obviously a big issue all the time. Among the things that the COVID-19 crisis has sort of highlighted, the many things that were already broken in our system. Gig workers, being unable to go to the doctor and have insurance to cover that makes this crisis both scary for the individual, but also for what potential risk they bring to the wider population. But also beyond health insurance, there's also things like paid sick leave and all kinds of other benefits. Basically, there are none unless you are doing very well and are savvy and have good savings or investments and things like that. There's basically no built-in safety net in freelancing and gig work. And the last problem that I want to touch on is that the government basically has no idea we exist. Which I've been spending a lot of time in the last year. Last year, I announced a project over the next 10 years to help 10,000 people become sustainably independently employed, whether that's to start a solo business themselves or through some other means. And in promoting and getting people on board with this project, the Chamber of Commerce, not the Chamber, screw the Chamber, the Department of Commerce, responded extremely positively to the plan. However, it became very clear the blind spot within which freelancers and gig workers live when it comes to government-based economic planning. And you can see that today in how yesterday Philly released the first cut of their support package, which boy, oh boy, I know how rough my week has been. I would not want to be somebody working for City Hall right now. So my heart goes out to them. And I say this with all of the empathy in the world. But I expected and was effectively corrected. I was glad that they even called out that independents and solopreneurs are, in the, Jake, I think when new folks come in, you might need to mute them as well. There you go. I reached out to some council people and said, hey, it would be great for you to at least acknowledge that gig workers and freelancers exist in this package. And they did, although they then doubled down and said, they're going to prioritize support for independents who hire lots of other subcontractors. So basically independents who look like normal businesses get the relief. Surprise, surprise. This is a systemic issue at city, state, and federal. I'm talking to folks at all levels about it. And the good news is they're starting to acknowledge the problem. The bad news is most of them have no idea where to look. Again, we exist in a blind spot, and how do you identify your blind spots? It's hard. I'm trying to help. And so that includes conversations around health insurance and sick leave and all kinds of things. I'm very interested to see what we come out on the other side of this crisis looking like. If we look at the countries that do have social support for a wider range of workers, what does the US look like? If I'm optimistic, and I tend to be a cautious optimist, I think there's a possibility that on the other side of this, this may accelerate the development of any of these things going forward. So I'm still going to keep working on it. If you're interested in that and want to talk about it, or other people who are, that is a highly collaborative effort. So I'm interested in connecting on that. The last leg here, since I'm not just here to talk about problems, I want to talk about what we can do. I'm going to sort of go through those same bullet points, but from a solutions perspective. So people are worried about, being cut as an hourly worker, and that's a reasonable fear. How do you address that? There's a great piece of advice that we've given many times, and my business partner that I mentioned earlier, Amy Hoy, shared in an article that I'm actually going to link in the chat room for you to check out later. But the frame of mind here is to don't be an expense, be an investment. And this is a tough mindset for a lot of freelancers to get into, especially creative freelancers, where they look at their output, their value as their creative work. And the challenge here is to learn how, and the opportunity, I would say, is to learn how to look at your work, the services you provide, whether they're creative or otherwise, through the lens of business value, and try to understand, of the companies who are hiring you, why. Right? Companies don't hire. This is true of employees too. People don't send you money every 2 weeks or at the end of the month or at the end of your contract because you're a nice person or because they like you. They do it because you solve some business problem. And companies that do have money to spend will continue looking to spend that money to solve the business problems they still have. We can look at every single economic crisis throughout history that is recorded. And while economic movement does slow in many cases, that's a recession effectively, or depression more drastically, it's basically never ground to a complete halt, right? At least not for more than a couple of days. And I think the reality here is to remember that businesses will still spend money when things are bad. The challenge is understanding what their problems are today, which they may be different from what they were yesterday or last week. And we've got a moving target here, but I think that is the real opportunity. And that article that Amy talks about, how to be an investment rather than an expense, how to think about that, I think is really valuable. If you enjoyed that article, down at the bottom, there's a link to a part 2 where we talk a little bit more about the concrete actions that you can take from there. The second thing that I think is a solution is to learn how to market yourself proactively. So like I said, folks are used to, I think portfolio is especially in creative fields, a portfolio or, a PDF of your past work and services and stuff like that. That's what we think of when we say we want to market our work. And that's important. The truth is when I'm looking at a couple of different service providers, I do want examples of their work to help me figure out, who's going to create the kind of result that I'm interested in. But the other thing is that I think businesses, especially savvy businesses that are going to be spending money in these times, aren't just hiring you for the work output you do. They're also hiring you for the way you think, the way you understand their problems, and the way you solve those problems. So the trick here is, how does your portfolio tell them how you came to that conclusion, right? And if all you do is push pixels or write the words they tell you and things like that, you are going to be an expense instead of an investment, right? So the shift here is from a service provider to a consultant, where people aren't just paying you for the work output, they're paying you for advice, they're paying you for your expertise. And this is for a lot of people, this is a shift in how you position yourself. And the truth is you do not need to be the most expert in experts town to be a consultant, right? You have some experience working with past clients and consultants. You have a perspective on how to solve problems and make that part of why people hire you, in addition to whatever the service is. And all of a sudden you start making the shift from a service to an investment, from an expense to an investment. So how do you get people to know that, right? We know what a portfolio looks like, or our website of past work. How do you do that? And the answer is you share what you know, you teach what you know. And this is a lot of what we teach in the Stacking the Bricks business, and a lot of my friends, and frankly, every bit of business that I've had experience with, I've been able to reach people because I was generous with what I knew, with what I was thinking. I was open and transparent. And I didn't really worry too much about what other people thought. I worried a lot more about what other people did, right? I worried about, are they doing a thing or not doing a thing? And how can my advice, perspective, or whatever it is that I have to share, help them do the thing that they already want to do, right? That might not be clearly connected to selling a service or a product, but it is. And here's why, is because someone needs to trust you in order to buy from you. And the easiest way to earn somebody's trust, the most reliable way to earn somebody's trust, is to teach them something, and teach them something that they know they need. And right now, there is an unbelievable opportunity because the world is full of people that suddenly have new problems that they've never solved before. And there's opportunities for you to start helping those people, right? And doing that in a effectively scalable way. So you can do one-on-one Zoom calls, offer free coaching, or you can do a group call. And then you can save that recording, turn it into a blog post or a LinkedIn post, or wherever it is that your customer audience is on the internet. Use this time now. I would say, especially in the next 30 days, selling in the next 30 days is going to be really, really hard. I think that's just the truth. Not impossible. Again, money is still flowing, but I would use the next 30 days, and I am using the next 30 days in all of our businesses to invest in our audiences and help them solve this problem, because frankly, we're solving it with them. I might only be one step ahead of them, but them being one step behind me means there's still an opportunity to help them. And I will do that because I know when the money does start flowing, I'm going to be one of the first people that they come to and ask for help and say, hey, I'm ready to spend that money. You were so helpful before. I'm grateful. I took the advice. It actually worked. I trust you that you know how to solve this problem. I want to work with you now, right? So you're sharing this stuff. And then the other thing I would say is, if you don't already have an email list or a newsletter, whether that's MailChimp or I use ConvertKit, which is actually started by a friend of mine. I'll share a link to that a little bit later. ConvertKit currently has a deal for it's up to 500 subscribers for free. They expanded their free plan to help people like us figure this out and build our lists in this point in time, because every time you connect with somebody, you help them, you need the ability to follow up and reconnect, right? And so not having an email list means every time you potentially have an availability, you do what? You go to LinkedIn and you say, hey, looking for opportunities, and you blend in with everything else along with whatever the algorithm does for you that day, versus having an email list of people who already know you and trust you because you send them updates about the next article or whatever it is. You're right in their inbox. You're cut all through the noise. And when you do have something you can offer them, you don't have to worry about the algorithm delivering it to them or not. So like having an email list is the closest thing, in my experience, to having a money tree that you can shake when you need it. It's one of the reasons I'm a little calmer right now, because I have an established list in all of the industries and sectors that I'm a part of, so that, I'm going to invest in those people now. And then as things stabilize, those are going to be my customers, because I've been investing in them, not just for the last 30 days, but for as long as they've been on my list. Yeah, so social media is good for getting things out there. Use whatever network you've got, but working on getting people to sign up for an email list. They say, hey, I'm going to send this stuff out more often. This is the easiest way to stay on top of what I've got, and I've got more stuff that's going to be useful for you. Another piece of related advice is to get closer to the money. So if your client just canned you, ended your contract, didn't renew your contract, whatever it might be, it might feel like, oh shoot, all businesses aren't spending money. But as we already talked about, that's just not true. So the question is which businesses are spending money? What problems do they have, and how can you help them? This might be a touchy subject for some people, but companies that are laying off people still have work that needs to be done. So letting companies know that still need that work being done, that you're available, and that you're available for gig hire. Again, in the same way it's easier to fire somebody hourly, it's easier to hire somebody hourly. You got to do all this work to earn that trust. But I would also say use your network, however small it may be, to say, hey, this is what I do. This is the problem that I solve, and what kind of businesses I solve that problem for. The last two things I'll mention are really, really quick, and then we'll switch to Q&A. I mentioned healthcare earlier. And I've been working on a project for since last summer to try and create something, anything that allows people that do not have employer-based healthcare or group-based healthcare access something that is better than the marketplace can offer. It's taken a lot of work, but I found some partners that are working on a national scale, and we were building a product that we were planning to launch this summer. We're doing everything we can to expedite that and make that available, even if it's pieces of that available sooner. And literally 30 minutes before this call, I whipped up the landing page that I just posted in the chat room, which is page.indiehall.org/healthcare. That's a waiting list, and we'll be sending out a brief survey to get an idea of where people's current situation is in terms of your healthcare needs and your current level of access. But we're going to be expediting that, and the plan was to roll that out in Philadelphia first anyway, so we're going to stick to that plan. Something I'm really excited about. The partners that I've met are awesome. The idea here is that for an affordable price, you've got access to your primary care physician, the prescriptions you need, and mental health care access. Boy, oh boy, do we need mental health care access more than ever before. So that's all going to be rolled in, and all for a price that is going to beat the pants off the marketplace. Nothing like this exists in the United States. I'm really happy that we're able to launch it here in Philadelphia and then service the rest of the country. The very last thing that I'll mention is to call your congresspeople, or whomever it is in government, local, state. In fact, like, I don't actually know how that whole system works. I hope some of you do. They're figuring things out day by day, and it's going to be based on our voices. If you are a solo small business owner, they need to hear from you. And if you know others, they need to hear from them too. Now is the time to just destroy their voicemail boxes, their email inboxes with testimony about how this is affecting you and the businesses that you know. That's how we're going to get noticed in whatever relief packages are being built over however long it's being built. I'm expecting us not to show up in the first cuts. I like to keep my expectations low so I'm not hurt and disappointed. But I think that's the reality that we're working with. So I think I've gone a couple minutes over time, but I hope that was useful. I'm happy to stick around a little bit longer than 12:30 for questions. I think the plan for questions is to invite folks to come on the screen if you like. If you click on the participants button down below in Zoom, a little window will come up, and then there's a raise hand button. And if you click on that, I will call your name, and then you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Alternatively, if you just want to ask the question in the text chat room, that's okay too. I can answer them from there.
All right, thanks a lot, Alex. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I don't know if you don't see the raise hand option, I might have added it too late. There is
that's what I didn't see it, Jake.
Oh, okay.
Got it.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, so
if people just want to ask the question in the chat room, that's totally cool.
Yeah.
But
I can get started. I actually did have a question for you.
Yeah, shoot.
I read an interview with Mark Cuban the other day. He was just talking about what we're talking about right now, and he mentioned one thing people could be doing is collaborating with competitors in their industry to revitalize.
I totally agree. Yeah.
It is, and I actually looked on your Twitter this morning, and I saw you were calling out to other co-work space operators. Have you done that in the past? Collaborated?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I totally agree. Yesterday I hosted a 2-hour sort of a brain dump. I ran effectively an hour-by-hour play-by-play of how we closed Indy Hall, trying to encourage other co-working spaces to do it to slow the spread, and how to do it in a way that will cost them the fewest members and the fewest lives. So that's my default in the industry. I don't view other co-working spaces as competitors. If they view me as a competitor, that's their problem. We've been trying to give away the lessons that we learn for over a decade, and people will willingly ignore them all day long. So I'd rather do that. But in terms of concrete collaborations, a great example that I heard about, I think it was last night, is there was, I want to say it was a shipping and distributing company in the food service industry that their drivers were being poached by Amazon because Amazon's ramping up their infrastructure. And under normal circumstances, they would have, called out the legal dogs or, done whatever they could to defend. And in this case, they turned around and they called Amazon and said, hey, how about we give you the drivers and instead you solve a distribution problem that we have. Mm. I wish I could remember what the example of that was, but it was an opportunity. It's the kind of thing where the typical response was able to be undermined by something where everybody needs something right now. And this goes back to what I said before. Every business needs something right now. I think this is an unprecedented opportunity to look to people that you might view as your competition and say, hey, if we're hurting, there's a good chance you are too. What could we do together that is of mutual benefit, even if it's just short term? That's better than none. I think that there are some people that still will not be receptive to that, and that is totally to be expected. But I think now is an unprecedented time where people are with their back against a wall, are willing to try anything. And I think it's an interesting opportunity to collaborate. I'll add in the caveat that, when it comes to a collaboration, especially when money's involved, doing it with people that you don't already have some sort of pre-existing relationship is tricky. But this whole thing is tricky. So I think it's one of those go in eyes wide open. You don't be naive, but I think you can still be open-minded and generous. And my philosophy has always been to lead with generosity and cap my downside, right? Where if this collaboration goes wrong, the worst thing that can happen is not that bad. I've invested a little bit of time, a little bit of resources. And if in doing that, I learn, oh, actually working with this person or this organization works really well. Then maybe we invest more, or we do something where there's more shared upside or riskier things. But yeah, that's how I think about collaboration right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I haven't seen any more questions in the chat. If we have another minute or so here, if anyone wants to throw a question now.
Yeah, Karen, go for it.
I think I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, if you want to turn your camera and just raise your hand the old-fashioned way, that works too.
Jazz hands.
There you
go. I really love that attitude, Alex, because I think at a time like this when people are feeling so threatened, so threatened or vulnerable and stuff, I think some people want to hold on, just hold on. But I love that leading with generosity and being open, because of course, by doing things like that and forcing us to look at things in a different perspective, that's where the real innovation, that's where all those those new ideas come from being really collaborative. So I've always really loved that about you, because I've seen you live and work it for how many years I've known you, since you opened Indy Hall.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess with that, we'll end it. Thank you everyone for coming out. Alex, really appreciate you taking the time out. I'm sure I'm positive you're in a challenging spot yourself, so I appreciate it.
I appreciate the invite, and I've there's claps. I like that.
There you go.
That's cool.
Yeah,
there's I don't know where it is on your screen, but I'm seeing claps. I love that.
Because you have to type in that. Okay.
Oh, there's a little reaction thing. That's cool. What was I gonna say? These are welcome distractions in a lot of ways. So we did an exercise at Indy Hall a couple times over the last week where we invited our community to come on a call like this and do a little, we call it red light, yellow light, green light, and just sort of check in. Other situations we just get on and do coffee. But in the red light, yellow light, green light, one of the sort of realizations I had and some other people shared is, as chaotic as everything has been and as difficult as everything has been, it's the times that we're together that are all my green lights. So this is another one of them. Thanks for that.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone. And
everybody,
for more to come.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.